Hello and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance, the one-stop metaphysical shop where we talk about all things woo-woo, comparing notes from the East Coast to the West Coast and everything in between. There's a lot of trends that happen all over the United States, spiritually, energetically. It's always interesting to bring energetics into the conversation. So you'll find us talking about the mundane and how energy might apply and how you might move through these circumstances in a different way because there's so many different options. So with that in mind, if this is your first time joining us, the first step is to hit that like and subscribe button so you can know when we are in fact on. Typically Thursdays, 2 p.m. Pacific and 5 p.m. Eastern. And we have some introductions to do if this is your first time meeting us. So I am Dahlia Rose over here on the East Coast, holding down the fort at Crystal Cognizance, my little shop of metaphysical fun. I was going to say Little Shop of Horrors because I love that movie. But we serve our community with crystals, healing sessions, spiritual counseling, um, and classes like meditation and tarot cards class and all kinds of wonderful things. And so that's what we're doing on the East Coast, but there's plenty of things happening on the West with my co-hosts.
West Coast is poppin', Dahlia. I'm Katrina Raspold. My husband Eric and I own Crossroads Occult. Previously, we owned Crossroads Metaphysical Store. We have now transitioned entirely online. We sell quality handmade magical products. We offer a variety of services along the lines of me being a professional witch in service to others. And so I do spell work for people, rituals, candles. That's my husband bringing in candles for me to burn. And also providing cleansing services and consultations and things like that. So that's readings, that sort of thing. That's what we do. In fact, tonight, which is at the Crossroads Hour, is happening. And so we'll be giving free readings at that time too. One thing to point out, and I don't like making our broadcasts not evergreen. We don't want them to be tied to a calendar or schedule, but we're not here next week because of Thanksgiving. We'll be taking that time off to spend with our families. So that's what we want to talk about, isn't it, Dahlia?
It is. I'm so glad you brought up that date because I want to blame it on being an entrepreneur, but I'm also going to blame it on like my issues with time and space because I said to my mom in passing this morning, it's her birthday today. I was like, oh God, Thanksgiving is next week. Because my partner was like, oh, I get to take off on Wednesday. And I was like, why? So thank you for being the anchor of this show as far as time and space. But, the interesting thing about these holidays is what they can bring up collectively. They can bring up like levels of like a desire for connection. So one thing that you'll see is people wanting to gather as family for reasons, whether you celebrate Thanksgiving or you gave it a silly, connotation like they did in Seinfeld. What was Festivus, I think was, or is that Christmas? Was that the alternative?
I don't remember.
Anyway, whatever you're celebrating, there is gatherings in the air. Now, what's interesting about these holidays, I think, is the shoulds and the shouldn'ts of these sort of family holidays and making things work. And I really want to bring the phrasing to the show, the level of toxicity that this can bring into your life and why that word. Because when you think about toxic, it's something that infiltrates your system on multiple levels. It spreads and slowly but surely causes additional problems rather than just inconvenience. So toxicity feels appropriate, and that's kind of what we're going after today.
It really is. And this is not a new thing. This is something that is probably, would you stop it already? My dog is being so stupid right now. Anyway, this is something that has existed, I think, pretty much as long as we've had families. The difference was that in the past, we rarely had families living in vastly separate households.
Mm.
And so you were almost forced to overcome, forced to get along, forced to reconcile. And even if you had harsh experiences with somebody, you often had to force yourself to overcome them. And that's kind of some of the things that you and I wanted to talk about today. You had forwarded an article to me that I thought was wonderful. It was on forgiveness. There were a couple of things that I won't say it was cringy for me, but it brought up questions for me that I wanted to explore a little bit. Forgiveness is an important part of interpersonal relationships.
Yes.
It's something we have to explore if we're going to have true connectedness with anybody. I mean, we're all flawed individuals. We are all going to make mistakes. We're all going to hurt each other intentionally and unintentionally. And it becomes, when do we release someone because they're an abuser
Mm.
in a way that we shouldn't have to? I won't say shouldn't have to forgive, because forgiveness is good for all of us as far as our healing goes, but shouldn't have to interact with that person anymore, versus forgiveness is something that needs to happen because I care about the continuity of this relationship. And I really think that that's what it all becomes about. And it's really exacerbated around the holidays because we have this expectation of forced communal experiences. That's my thought on it anyway. And then, it becomes make or break. What are we going to do? What is our level of sacrifice or healing that we're going to invest in order to have this family or group relationship?
I think that's a great place to start, right? When you're approaching these situations, I find myself in a lot of conversations with people where they're like, "What am I going to do?" Well, family is going to impose this, and I feel like I'm going to have to do this, and rarely do I hear a person start with, "This is what I want to do. This is what I'm willing to do." There seems to be this air of responsive reactivity rather than, I'm going in and I'm walking in with my suitcase full of these tools, and it is at this point that I will leave. Um, it's let me feel it out, and I think, not to get too far ahead in the article, but self betrayal is one of the issues that comes up when you rely on response and reactivity as opposed to what a real boundary is, which is a definition of how you will approach the situation. And I think there's a deeper conversation there about personal needs.
I agree. And one of the things that we screw up on in regard to making boundaries is we make boundaries about other people.
Yes.
We say things like, "You can't treat me this way," when clearly they can, because they are.
Right.
So rather than that, which is absolutely, I hate to say it's ludicrous, but it's ineffectual to say you can't treat me this way. It's not factual. And so we should make boundaries based on what we are planning to and will actually do. So things like, I am not going to continue in this conversation
Yeah.
if you are going to persist in having that tone with me, or
Yeah.
being abusive with me, or even being what I perceive to be abusive. I am not going to continue our friendship if you absolutely refuse to be on time when we set up an appointment, or if you're going to cancel on me so often.
Right.
And so it should be about the proactivity that you are willing to invest, not about demanding a behavior from somebody else. Now, that in and of itself creates cause and effect. It's saying, if you do this, I am going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay, because that is still you being proactive. But determining you can't do this, you will do this, you are going, no, you're trying to control the behavior of another person,
Right.
rather than control what you're allowing to have happen in your environment. That's something very different. And so I agree with you that when we're going into these situations, being reactionary, being the pinball instead of the flipper, is not the way to go, because you're putting all of your power in someone else's hands. My mother is going to feel this way if I don't do this. I know that my Uncle is going to start to bring up political comments that are offensive to me.
Mm.
And so I am going to have a reaction of anger or hatred or frustration over that. It's a matter of deciding what you're going to do to create the outcome that is, I guess, the most peaceful or the most practical or the most productive to you. Perhaps having that conversation with your mother ahead of time of saying, I know this means a lot to you. However, this is hurtful to me. And I'm going to be doing this, or this. Or, I mean, with the uncle, just if these conversations come up, I will excuse myself.
Yeah.
Or I will take a stand right there at the table, and that's how it's going to throw down.
And I like that sort of, it sounds like you're diving into a place of plans, right? Like it doesn't have to be that you bolt for the door, but it's like I'm at, at each stage of the boundary cross, I'm going to get closer and closer to that door. And I
Mm-hmm.
leave at that point. So leaving the room or, taking some time away, going outside, and then, finally getting in the car if that's where it ends up.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, historically, over the last 8, 9 years, every single time I go to Thanksgiving with these people, I get hurt. Every single time. There are boundaries crossed that I have set up. There are things that are said that they know affects me viscerally. And so I'm just not going to participate in this anymore. And people are afraid of that escalation. They're afraid to get to the place of saying, this isn't healthy for me, so I'm not going to do it. They feel like there's some kind of failing. They feel like they should constantly be modifying or forgiving or changing or shifting how they feel to accommodate somebody they perceive as an abuser, rather than just saying, I'm not going to participate in this. This isn't healthy for me. This isn't a good dynamic. It ruins Thanksgiving for everybody. So I'm just going to be over here, eating my banquet turkey TV dinner and being perfectly happy.
Yeah.
And people are afraid to jump to that. Now, like you said, there are increments in between that you can employ. Those are hard work. Sometimes it is just easier to say, you know what, I'm just not going to go. I'm not going to take Thanksgiving to heal that situation. Maybe I'll work on it throughout the year, but I'm not going to do it at a family holiday.
And that's a good point. If you have things in your spirit that you're like, man, we still haven't had this conversation and I can't stand in front of this person pretending that we don't still need to talk, then you can make those sort of determinations because you have to consider, am I plausibly going to be able to have this conversation, or is Aunt Susan going to jump in, give her opinion, and then I feel even more devastated for having tried. I think there's a big need to understand that we don't control other people's responses to us. So you may be thinking, at some point, if I say this the 11th time, they're gonna get it. You can't go in there like that. I've had a lot of conversations where I'm like, hey, folks, whatever you say needs to be said for you without expectation of a response or the right response.
I used to be that mom. I have adult children, 6 of them. And I was that mom who said, you know what? You guys do what you want to through the year. Ignore each other all you want. Be dicks to each other all you want. You will, by God, sit at my table at Thanksgiving. You will shut your fucking mouth and you will eat my turkey. You are going to be peaceful. You are going to give me my Thanksgiving experience that I want. And I was making my own beloved children miserable.
Oh,
Because
wow.
they have deep-seated resentments and angers toward each other that they may or may not need to work out. That's up to them. That's their healing path. That's their choice. I am a person that believes that there comes a time when I transition from being a teacher mom or a conditioning mom to a mom who is there if you decide to seek my advice. I stop helicoptering and mothering my adult kids. And if they come to me and say, Mom, what should I do about this? I don't know how to handle this. That's one thing. But it's not my job to teach these adults or guide their behavior when they're in their 30s and their 40s. I mean, that's their job. And if they don't see the value in these sibling relationships, to the point that they want to heal that rift. That's their choice and their relationship. And me forcing them to be together at holidays was inappropriate.
Right.
And it was exacerbating these anxieties and these frustrations they wanted so badly to make me happy and to provide that for me, that they're willing to just, nut up for 3 or 4 hours and hope nothing explodes. And that just isn't a healthy dynamic at all. And so it took me a long time to recognize that and say, you know what, this isn't about me. This is about 8 different individuals in this situation, plus their significant others.
Mm.
And I need to not have one day be something they have to shore up for,
Right.
for weeks ahead of time, or have special experiences with their therapist about. That's ridiculous. When I can have my own relationship with different ones of them on my own terms and their terms. So that's kind of what gave me the perspective on that was, wow, I'm doing that. I'm that person.
So the article that I had sent you was on toxic forgiveness, and I think we're really diving into that piece that whoever heard of such a term, right? I mean, there's a doctor or somebody who had coined that term toxic forgiveness and gone into what that can represent. Um, you know, the situations that we've described here do not foster true forgiveness, right? Like that was one thing that the article brought up was what is the definition of actual forgiveness? And it said forgiveness necessitates understanding and acknowledging that harm was done, to sit at a table, to be quiet, to when you said nut up. To do that is to not create understanding other than the understanding piece of my feelings don't matter. The understanding piece or acknowledging that harm was done and we're just going to sweep it under the rug. It's never going to get addressed. And that can create, from an energy standpoint, so much deeper wounds. I mean, we're talking shots to the solar plexus, all 3 chakras down: solar plexus, sacral, and root. Your safety is an issue. Bitterness, anger, and frustration hang around in the sacral, and your personal power is being impacted. And then you're supposed to open your heart to everybody that's sitting around you when it feels like you're sitting among, thieves and liars. So it's kind of a wild concept from the energetic and the mundane standpoint.
Absolutely. One of the things the article talks about is forgiving too soon
Mhm.
versus forgiving, taking too long to forgive. And it identifies that if we forgive too soon, we don't effectively process all of the hurt and the triggers and the frustrations that have gone into this volatile situation. And if we process too late, we allow resentment and anger to continually contaminate us beyond a reasonable, if you want to say, expectation, whatever that looks like, of resolution. And so I really think, and this is something the article didn't go into very much, it talked a lot about, response to an apology.
Hmm.
It talked a lot about how to continue contact with somebody you're in the process of forgiving. It didn't really go into how to process forgiveness if you don't receive an apology or an acknowledgement of the harm that's been done, or if you are not looking to have continued contact with that person. I think forgiveness is still important for us to heal and move forward. Carrying grudges and holding resentments is toxic to us
Yes, absolutely.
as much as it is to the other person. And it's toxic to the human condition because it puts a putrid and hateful energy into the world that we're feeling. So there is some pressure to forgive, and sometimes we want to just get that out of the way. Just let me just hurry up and forgive this person so I can move on. And sometimes, it takes time to figure out all the layers you've been damaged.
What about those moments of forgiveness where it's just like I'm forgiving you in order to manipulate you into talking to me, or I'm going to apologize, rather, I should have said.
I'm the bigger person.
Yeah, I'm going to apologize to you so that we start the conversation again, and only for me to hurt you again. So
Right.
I think more than ever, people are more sensitive to that kind of apology. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, if that's the apology that I'm going to get, um, like you said, what do you do with it? I think, you know, there is space and empowerment that we are not taught to feel into when we set our boundaries. Like it still shocks me at how surprised people are when they're like, yeah, I set a boundary and I actually felt good. And and it's like this like dirty secret, like, oh, I watched like Boundary was the porn that they just said they
Mhm.
enjoyed. And it's like, no, this is normal. They're and starting to set those boundaries. And if an apology is what you require to move forward, then that is your boundary, that's your line. And it's not worth compromising it to save face, or to well, what if people talk about you? They're guaranteed talking anyway,
They're talking about you anyway.
right?
Yeah.
And the least of it will be the boundary you set.
Right. And then there, like you touched on, there are those bullshit apologies, which are things like, I'm sorry that you felt attacked when I said blah, blah, blah. Or I'm sorry that it hurt you when blah, blah, blah. And, that's not any form of accountability. That's expressing dismay that somebody responded to your behavior in a certain way.
Right. I'm sorry for your response.
Right, right. And it's absolutely fine to say, I did not anticipate that I would get that reaction, or things like, it was certainly not my intention to cause this feeling, but it should quickly be followed up with, but obviously I did. And I wanna go into that a little bit and see how I can avoid hurting you that way in the future. And so there's one thing that where you're accepting that accountability, and there's another where you're just guilting the other person or making them feel like that they are inappropriate for
Mhm.
having the reaction that they did. And
Right.
that is self-evaluation. I mean, you and I have both had situations where we're like, wow, why, what? Where did you get that? Or how did you feel that?
Yeah.
And it's really important that we pull back and say, what was I projecting there? What was I feeling there? What was I responding to internally?
Yes.
And that's hard to do.
Yeah, and that level of awareness is definitely something to be practiced, right? Like for the people out there going, why aren't I doing this already? Because it was never taught. And I don't know about you, Katrina, but it's taken me at least 4 years to come to that level of awareness, and I still slip up with it, where I'm
Oh yeah,
just
I'm
like,
still not there.
feelings, and then
Yeah.
I'm just, so. Um, this piece of what made me, where was I when I reacted. I can recall situations where folks have gotten mad at me. Like I was working as a veterinary receptionist, just as an example, and I'm telling this person things that are beyond my control, like, this is the policy, this is what it is. And they're like, don't you blanking quote policy to me just because you're on the other side of that counter. And like, they're losing their shit over things that I
Mhm.
I was like, literally, it's on paper. You knew it before you came in, only to have that person come back and be like, I'm sorry, my dad's dying and I'm really stressed out. And I was like, well, like, I'm sorry your dad's dying, and also I'm not killing him. So if we could,
Mhm.
temper that response next time, that would be great. So it was an interesting thing, like the transference of energy. I think they call that well, it's called projection, right? So without realizing, hey, the root cause of this is not what I'm yelling at right now.
You know, um, we as a society also are pressured to forgive. It's
Mhm.
really a horrible place to be when you have two mutual friends that are fighting
Mhm.
and absolutely can't stand each other. And especially if they are demanding that you side with one or the other.
Mhm.
And that happens, unfortunately, quite a bit. And you really just want everything to be okay. And it just gets so complicated, and even more so with family, because they're usually not going to go away,
Right.
or take their burdens someplace else. So as a society, we really put the pressure on forgiveness. And what you're describing there is something that is theoretically with a person who's basically a stranger, who is coming in, putting their fear and frustration and anger onto you for something that is outside of your control. And
Yep.
often when a friend or a relative brings a grievance to you that they have with a mutual acquaintance, it's something that's outside of your control.
Yep.
You know, you can't change the fact that Aunt Susan is a political fucking powder keg, and that everything is going to set them off. That doesn't mean that you hate Aunt Susan and you want to create family drama by not inviting them.
Right.
So, I mean, there's so much that's loaded here. And the expectation that everybody will just be cool is a lot to place on varying personalities. And some of those personalities are looking for a fight. They're looking for a reaction of some kind.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times that person that's coming to your counter is really just wanting to get their anxiety release in a safe space, because they know good and well you're not going to do anything. The customer's always right.
Right. Well, and in the family situation, there's some expectation of loyalty, right? Like, at the end of the day, no matter what I do to you, I'm still your aunt, I'm still your mom, I'm still your sibling, whatever. And it's
Mm-hmm.
and I have to say to that, for people that come in here, they're still human, and if this person was not blood relative to you, how would you have responded? And that really gets down
Right.
to one of the things that the article was talking about, which is addressing your needs before you get into full forgiveness. So you figure out, what do I need to feel safe? What do I need to feel, satisfied with the situation? It brought up a cheating spouse, right, with regard to forgiveness. And
Mm-hmm.
it talked about, yeah, well, it didn't talk about, but what I've heard in many scenarios when it comes to cheating spouses is like, if you have to address what happened, you're going to address what happened. And it might come up a few times before it doesn't, because that understanding piece is there. And I understand more than ever, kind of from the article, which is, it's about how will I know when I'm safe? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you felt this way and you did these things, how will I know that I'm safe? If you do and feel those things again, how will I know that you
Mm-hmm.
won't choose to cheat again? If you're
Mm-hmm.
at a family holiday, how will I know that if I show up, you won't feel inclined to, back me into a corner to question me about my sexuality
Right.
because you don't understand or you don't feel comfortable with it?
And when you're talking about the cheating spouse issue, Dr. Phil McGraw he had an interesting perspective, because he was interviewing couples who had presumably gotten past a cheating experience and decided to stay together. And one of the things, and it was a guy who had done the cheating, and one of the things the guy said was, "Gosh, how long do I have to listen to this? It's been 3 years. How long do I have to deal with her going through my phone? How long do I have to deal with her listening in on my conversations with other people, with her asking me where I've been? When is enough enough? When do I get out of that?" And Dr. Phil said, "You know what? You do it until
Yeah.
you bought this. You bought this. You chose a behavior that was going to create this exact outcome. And you knew going into it, it would create this outcome. You just thought you were going to get away with it, and you didn't. And so you do it until she feels safe. You do it until she doesn't need to go through your phone anymore. But the other question becomes, is this something worthy of a life sentence?
Yes, that was the other thing. Holding.
Does the crime of scrutiny, or the punishment of scrutiny warrant the crime, and what does that look like? And that's so individual to the couple. And something that came up in the article was that thing of forced forgiveness, where you say you forgive them just to make peace and move along, and yet you make little comments and digs when you feel threatened or when you feel upset. And I think people do that a lot. They say, yeah, I forgive you, I understand, I hear you. But then they get into the situation. Oh, yeah, you're looking at her ass, aren't you? Oh, she's just your type, isn't she?
Yeah.
And you get that acerbic comment coming up in you over something you thought that you healed.
That's such a, I think it's important to identify where, like, how do you address these sort of things, right? Like, on some levels, I think those thoughts are coming back from that place of safety that I mentioned. And so the article talked about feeling into things, feeling into your body, that when you have truly forgiven a person, there will be lightness in your body, less cluttered mind, some emotion and body peace, stress reduction, and a boost to mental health. And if you are not able to achieve those things to me, some part of me wants to say there should be a percentage that you can achieve those things, right? So you're achieving them more often than you are not, but slowly increasing over time, rather than just saying like, oh well, you shouldn't feel so weighed down by situations. You shouldn't have to worry about your partner looking at other people. And timing comes into all of this as well. Or else, like the article said, resentment and anger come up.
Yeah.
Where you haven't sped through things.
Well, and one thing the article also mentions is the difference in forgiving and forgetting. And I think of trust as a teapot. I mean, if you break that teapot, you can glue it back together almost flawlessly, but it is always broken. You will always be able to see the cracks. You will always be able to see that happened and there was a tragedy that occurred. And you can see that without grieving the teapot.
Yeah.
You might not ever put hot water in it again, but and that means that anytime that trust is broken, whether it is an infidelity or it's you pulled me aside to question my sexuality, or you called me a name that is unforgivable. Anytime that happens, you never forget that person has the capacity to do that, and your view of them is forever changed. And so the relationship and the connectedness is forever changed. It might be better, it might be worse, but it is different. And you can't pretend that the problem never happened. I think that's the biggest mistake people make, is they do want to forgive and forget and move on to where it was before. And once you have had a violation of trust, you will absolutely never go back to the same place again.
No.
Because that's always changed. And forgetting that something happened means you're glossing over, you're ignoring a huge painful experience that happened, and that isn't healthy. Now, making it the forefront of your conversation and your relationship with that person also is not healthy. But there should not be a denial that this occurred, and it becomes a part of the fabric of that relationship.
Christy is sharing an interesting story here that comes with, I think, some of that forgive, forget piece, but it sounds like she's also trying to set a boundary. She said, I relate to this so hard. I go non-contact with my family as when my family has crossed my boundaries or I need to teach them how to treat me. and how not to be. I'm always expected to forgive them without any apologies. You know, that piece of teaching people how to treat you, I used to think that was like the golden rule, and even that has a line, because Christy is here is doing her best to create a bridge for her family to come close, and her family keeps setting that bridge on fire with their words, with their actions. And you know, Christy, I have to say, you know, it's not always your job to teach people how to treat you, because when you put those rules out, I would even put a number on it. If you have put those rules out how to treat you 3 to 5 times, you've done enough. And at that point, they know, and they are just choosing to disrespect you.
Yeah. I
And
agree with that completely. You know, and it is that. I mean, if you tell somebody, listen, I don't eat meat. I've made a choice to be vegetarian, and they keep inviting you over to your house, you know, yeah, okay, the first couple times maybe they forgot and they're serving a meat based meal, but there comes a time where they are flagrantly disregarding what is a lifestyle choice for you, you know, and it's the same way, you know, you can't say you didn't know once you know. And another thing that really gets me on this family stuff, especially, how often is it, well, that's just how they are?
mm,
Or, you know me, that's just how I am. I'm always going to speak very directly to you. I'm a straight shooter. That's what I do. You
mm,
hear that all the time for people that do not want to follow any sort of societal contract for how to behave. And that's just how I am. Well, you know what? Then this is just how I am.
right. This is my how you are.
I am not going to expose myself to how you are if you are unable to control, if you don't care enough about me to control your behavior and make it a way that's not hurtful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really get tired of, oh, you know, that's just how Aunt Susan is. You know,
It's such
she's just
an
like that. Oh,
it's such
she be
an
not like
interesting
that.
phrase, right? Like, you know, okay, well, if this is how you are, what do you expect me to do? You know,
Right.
if we can have the conversation that this is how you are, why is it that my response can't just be how I am, and that
Mm-hmm.
that I'm expected to change in response to you? I mean, when you're having those, and especially in a family dynamic, like you cannot make 5, 6 adjustments. One person should not have to make 5 or 6 adjustments just because there are 5 or 6 asshole family members, that, and that's just how they are.
Well, and you're shutting down more and more and more and more of yourself. And you know, if you lob a tennis ball onto my side of the court, I'm either going to hit it back or I'm going to walk away if I don't want to play tennis with you anymore. You know, and yeah, exactly what you said. How much do you need to curtail down? Now, Aunt Susan's probably thinking the same thing. She's probably thinking, man, I can't mention the goddamn gays anymore. Okay. I can't mention, you know, my political views anymore. I can't, you know, so maybe Aunt Susan just decides this is too restrictive and she's going to hang out with her little MAGA people, you
Yeah,
know? So,
stay over there. You know, don't
so
even come.
she can make her decisions as well. And part of that comes from Aunt Susan, we're going to make it uncomfortable for you to be inappropriate. But nobody wants to say a word. That's what kills me. You get
Mm,
all these little groups of people sitting around talking about Aunt Susan. You know, oh gosh, we're going to have to put up with this. Oh gosh, she's going to bring the green jello with the carrots in it again. Oh gosh, this is going to happen. But nobody will say anything. And sometimes it needs to be that person who will stand up at Thanksgiving and say, you know what, Aunt Susan, shut your fucking mouth. Stop complaining about everybody sitting at this table and enjoy your damn dinner. And people won't do that because they don't want to rock the boat, you know.
meanwhile, the boat's already rocking from Aunt Susan.
Oh, the boat's going down.
God, you know, I think on the show I have remarked how much our relationship with the divine and deities and things like that can be reflective of our connection with, or like our interpersonal connection. So family as well. And one of the things that you were seeing as a trend in the wintertime here was this going within is what we've been talking about through the fall, but now we're getting closer to winter, and this piece of wanting to connect with like higher self and deity and the divine and things like that. I think that is also reflective of sort of this connection and family piece. Like if you don't feel connected to your family, you may be pushing and pursuing relationships with the divine that you wouldn't have otherwise in an attempt to stave off the discomfort of maybe you can't go back home for Thanksgiving or what have you. I mean, I think I feel into that kind of trend. Is that what you've been seeing?
I think so. I think people become naturally more introspective as we go into the dark of the year. I think that's the human condition. I
Mhm.
think that comes from times when the days are getting so much shorter that we were limited on what we could do outside of the home when we didn't have artificial light. So we tended to go inside and into the home, and I think that was reflected with going inside ourselves as well. And so we do tend to become a lot more introspective. And when that happens, we start to want those divine connections a little bit more. And I think that for some people, I don't know how it is with me and with others, but for me, when I go back home to Kentucky, if I go to Red Hill Baptist Church, even as a pagan, I feel very connected to God because those are my roots. That's where I grew up. Hearing that choir sing, seeing that preacher do his thing up there, I get that feeling of divine connectedness, and that's the same feeling I have when I go into a Wiccan circle or when I'm in a sweat lodge, and it's that connectedness to God and to that God energy, and even working with individual gods and goddesses.
Mhm.
Each one has a different affinity, a different feel, but they all have that divine sense to them. And I think that people start to crave that as they go into the longer, darker months. And I think that as we get more vulnerable by going into these holiday experiences, as you said, we want that backup.
Yeah, yeah,
We want that connection and that spine that we get from absolute faith.
yep.
And so I think that's what drives it. I really do. I've had a lot of people lately asking me, how do I find my patron god or goddess? And how do I connect more deeply? And how do I access that energy so I'm not so tired when I'm doing candle work? And so there's been a lot of questions about that. I think that it's just the going inside that does it.
I like how you put it back up.
Yeah.
I mean, the more you know about yourself, which includes your divine connections, the less people can impose on you. I like the idea of it being backup because it is sort of something you can lean back on um, without this sort of notion that like these, divine aspects or deities or gods will sort of protect you from
Mm-hmm.
not that's not what I want to say. You'll be protected, but it won't change what people say to you, or you maybe you'll just be more stored up energetically. I think that's where I've sort of
Mm-hmm.
envisioned things going.
Well, and backup also means getting a spine. It also means standing tall in who you are and your own truth. It's easier to do that when you feel you have divine backing to what you're doing. And a lot of people go to their ancestors for that, which is
Mm.
fine if you have that relationship with your ancestors. But your ancestors might be the very reason your ass is sitting at Thanksgiving dinner, you
Yeah.
know, especially in some of the cultural um, variances that are there. There are some cultures that are very against anything negative to the elders, or going against anything your parents don't want.
Mm.
And so there might be a cultural influence there that the ancestors would support. So before you access a divine being or an ancestor to back you up in this, make sure they would have backed you up.
Yeah.
That I think that's a big push too, is that we think that just because somebody crosses the veil that they're suddenly impartial and all-knowing and all-wise, when they are actually more of who they would always be when they're on the other side.
Yeah, for sure. I wondered if sort of the conflicts that can have, like in terms of speaking with family, with ancestors, things like that. It seems like there's some um, conversation around toxic forgiveness with all of that as well. Like for those that have crossed over, it's a family time and you're thinking, oh, maybe I should forgive what they did to me in life because they're dead, more around this time of year. Or even um, I've had some connections like with the divine where I didn't care for the way that something went down. And the toxic forgiveness engendered by my Catholic upbringing says, oh, well, don't be mad at God or don't be mad at the divine. And that to me is toxic forgiveness as well. So I feel like there's a conversation to have
Mhm.
here about deities, energies, and the toxic forgiveness of that and what your relationship is with them.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I have a different kind of relationship now with deity than I had when I was Protestant. And it looks kind of like, oh, we're going to talk about this later. And
Yeah.
they'll say, oh, fuck yeah, we are. you better believe we are. But now is not the time. Correct. We have an accord. So yeah, and we don't always understand the bigger scheme. Sometimes we don't even believe that there's a bigger scheme and that we're just an ant farm that our deities find particularly amusing. One thing you kind of touched on that I really want to look at is forgiveness of the dead. That is complicated. That is nuanced. And sometimes it's easier to forgive dead people because they can't hurt you anymore, except the hurt that we're doing inside of us.
Right.
And they're not doing that. We are.
Mm.
They've done their thing however long ago. But we are still hurting ourselves over it. But sometimes it's harder because we will never get that apology from them.
Truly.
That is done. And I see people that go through their entire adult lives just looking for validation, respect, and pride from their parents. And then their parents die and they never ever get that. No matter what they accomplish, it's not good enough for that parent. And so once a person dies that has wronged you, you have lost that avenue to ever really know that they understood what they did to you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a grief of that. But again, it's also easier because again, they're never going to hurt you again.
That is a catch-22 for sure. Hmm. As far as so, what are your thoughts on? Because I sort of push this with the forgiveness piece, like going to see a medium and having them sort of foster that connection or foster that forgiveness piece or um, not reconciliation because I don't think that's a thing, but um, helping heal through toxic.
I'm not the person to ask that, honestly, because I find, with the exception of Gladys, I find all mediumship totally suspect.
That's awesome.
Even my own, when I'm channeling somebody, I'm always aware that there's a really good chance I'm putting my filters onto it.
Okay.
And there's almost nobody I trust not to put their own viewpoints and filters on what's coming through. And I don't trust the connectedness between the living and the dead to effectively convey what's being said without, I guess, language barriers, even if you're speaking the same language.
And that's fair, because most want that positive, happy ending. So you're gonna get the well, your father says I'm sorry, and your father may not be saying you're sorry.
Right.
Might be saying, "Nah, I was justified in what I did, and did
If
it for you."
if a medium were to tell me your father says he's sorry, I would immediately know they were not speaking to my father. You
Mm.
know, and that's my filter. So I just think that between everything the person is feeling, everything that's going on with the dead person and what they might have processed with the experience of death, and everything that the medium has to layer onto it, I just don't trust the process of mediumship. And that's a horrible thing to say,
Not
you
really.
know, but I just don't. When you're ready, I do want to process or talk a little bit about what Heidi Pamela said.
I think this is a great opportunity to do that. So, weathering the holidays when you're disconnected from family. Do you want to take a
Yeah.
stab at that first?
Blow that shit up. Go out and have an amazing time. Handpick your people that you want to make new traditions with. It's not about your family, because what's going to happen if you say, you know what, I'm just not going to go, is you're going to sit home and pout. And you're going to have that fear of missing out that's going to kick in. You're going to watch shit you don't want to see on TV. You're going to eat food you don't really want to eat. And this is not the way to spend your holiday. Now, granted, that holiday is just another day. It really is. There is no magical component to December 25th. Okay. It is what it is. It's a day. But it's a day when the energy of most of the world is focused on family and togetherness and giving and gifts and baby Jesus in the manger and all these things, it's all these exciting things. And so that energy does permeate. And so what you need to do is celebrate. Because as soon as my kids left home, I'm like, fuck it, I ain't decorating. I'm not going to do that. That's not going to happen. Um, and I lost something with that. I
Mm.
lost a feeling that comes with that. I needed to replace that with a different feeling. So the most important thing is to create new traditions. Now, like I told you, I was always about, you're going to be here for Thanksgiving, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. This year, my daughter, who is always here for Thanksgiving, who always brings the pie, that's her job for Thanksgiving, is she just within the last month started a brand new full-time job, and she's been immersed in perfecting this job.
Mm.
And she's exhausted. It's over an hour's drive for her to get here.
Oh, wow.
She has her partner's family who's local. And so I just immediately said, hey, listen, if you and Avery don't want to come for Thanksgiving, I totally get that. I totally understand. Just stay local if you want to, because that's easy. And she's like, oh gosh, Mom, thank you. Yes, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk to Avery just to be sure, but I think that's what we're going to do. And she was very relieved. But I want my kids to go make their own traditions and find their own things to do, whatever that looks like. In a Christmas Story, they went out to a Chinese restaurant for Christmas dinner, and that's a tradition. So I think find your tradition, do something. Don't just sit home and do nothing. Pick your people, find somebody you love to spend time with, or find something you love to do and go out and do that and create new traditions. That's my suggestion for how to celebrate the holidays if you're disconnected from families. Disconnected from your family doesn't end your celebration or
True.
your fun.
I don't have much to add to that other than maybe one piece of the article on toxic forgiveness brought in, which was finding your truth. I think getting into, I mean, I'm like probably toxically introspective. So my piece on that would be trying to figure out why I felt disconnected and trying to bring in maybe some opposites to that to balance the scales. So if I feel disconnected because of a lack of communication, one of the things that I'm going to do is reach out to as many people as I can to have conversations. If I'm feeling disconnection because I feel wronged or angry, I'm probably going to go and try to find something to like break, or, some way to express that anger. Some people, I used to create art and it was beautiful whenever I was angry. I don't have any of those pieces anymore because they remind me of being angry. So, there's a lot of maybe frou-frou opportunities. And then there's, like Katrina said, party it up. But I think if you are lost in decision, take that deeper look to say, well, what's my truth around this whole thing? Am I setting a boundary and that's why I feel disconnected? Well, that may be like shame and guilt, right? And that's going to require that may be why you have a resistance to having fun with other people, because you're self-punishing. Well, now that you've gotten all that out of the way, now you can start to get into, well, what do I actually have to feel guilty about? I was not the one who caused the problem. And then moving on from there. So finding our truth, using it as a North Star can take us really far in the act of deciding how to proceed. But I think the point is, do not, like Katrina said, do not sequester yourself, because that can turn into self-punishment, sulking, and other things, unless you enjoy being alone. And that's just a different story. But it doesn't, like, based on your phrasing, Heidi, like you personally saying, what do you do if you're disconnected? Being alone does not sound like your jam. So
it should be something you weather. It should be something you transition to something else. And, one of the things I really also want to say is that there's some people who, despite the irritants that are there in a family gathering, want to go. And one of the things you might be weathering is, I can't go because Aunt Susan, she's going to make me feel this kind of way. She's going to do this sort of thing. Is to disempower her from doing that and just go and have a good time. And when Aunt Susan starts up, you're just like, nope, we're not doing that. And have a conversation with someone there you love. Seat yourself so that you are with the people in that family environment that you do enjoy, and ignore those components that you don't. That's okay too. You can give yourself permission to go into a toxic family environment and glean from that the positive things that you want, but do it on purpose. Don't do it because you feel like you have to. Do it because you're making a conscious choice that, hey, there's 10 people here, 3 of them I can't stand, but I really love the other 7 and want to be with them. And I'm not going to give those 3 the power to harm my day.
If you're going into that as well, and you have, Heidi's reaction is funny. Her head exploded. So one of the things that's happening, on your end of things, Katrina, you were talking about candles, you were talking about oils, we've talked about deities. When you talk about standing your ground with Aunt Susan, going anyway, a lot of like mini tools come to mind to support that grand stand. I think once we talked about wearing a mirror, as as a pendant. You can wear certain crystals
Your little tourmaline. Get your little tourmaline.
Yep. Make sure it's like tumbled or carved or something so it doesn't disintegrate off your chest the minute that.
Get a bracelet even that has the basalt stones or tourmaline stones, and pew, pew, pew.
So you make tons of oils. I think I actually have all of them, and I was going to say hundreds, but it's probably like in the 50s, 75s.
Yeah.
But so what oils would you recommend from your bag?
Fiery Wall of Protection. I have it in spray and oil. That's one of my favorites. I like but see, I'm the one also that if I did go to a family event, which I haven't to in many, many years, I'm the one that's that pagan cousin riding in, with the goat driven carriage, so I've got like chicken feet hanging off me and things like that. They, I think come
the feathered hat.
Yes, correct. Looking like Michelle Pfeiffer and everything. So I think that I think Fiery Wall is one I really like. And I also, you can even go like Run Devil Run and Cast Out Evil. And
get next to Aunt Susan and all of a sudden she wants to leave.
Get over oil and stuff like that. No, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
And just creating that shielding as you go in so that, hey, nothing can get through my wall that I don't want in here. And if it gets through, that's my fault.
Mm.
And that's not blaming the victim, but how much power are you going to give these people? It's just their mouth, unless they're going to be putting hands on you or, hitting you or hurting you in some way physically. What they say is inappropriate, but you are allowing it to land
Right.
and have an effect on you. And so you do get to kind of mitigate that a little bit. That does not exonerate them, but for an immediate fix, and then you can just make those decisions about next year, and
Yeah.
what you feel like you're going to manage and what you're not. And the thing is, people change a lot in a year. She's not going to, but you might. And you might just decide, hey, I'm not going to do this next year, or next year I'm feeling stronger. I'm going to go, and she might be dead by then for all I know, because Aunt Susan's old.
I love your rawness. I really do. One
People
other
die. It's an imperfect world.
Did you say it is a perfect world because
it's an imperfect world?
Oh, in some cases, it's a perfect world.
Mm-hmm.
Wearing shiny, glittery clothing also helps. Like I have this shirt that has sequins on it, just on the chest and the stomach. And
I knew you did.
Yeah,
I knew you had to.
I love wearing that shirt when I need a little oomph, little shielding. Question for you, because I use your oils. One of the ones that I think I would throw in for protection for the ladies listening to our broadcast is Cleo May.
Cleo May is a good one.
And I tend to put those like back of the head where the head meets the neck. Maybe a little on the chest, the wrists, maybe under the arms a little bit. Do you have like spots that you apply those oils?
Those exact ones. Sometimes third eye I'll do.
Oh,
but I do like the base of the skull, because that's the area that is managing a lot of your subconscious reactions.
Mm-hmm.
It's headaches, it's sleep disruptions and things like that. So getting through this point in the front and in the back really speaks to your circadian rhythms and to your involuntary responses. So those are great areas to hit. Things like your heart chakra, getting that shored up. Definitely your throat, for your throat chakra, to make sure that you're speaking at the right time and shutting up at the right time. And just trusting yourself to be authentic and to be true to yourself without giving energy to things that don't warrant it. And when you're bruised, when you've been beaten every year, metaphorically speaking, you're sore, you hurt. And so the least little touch can be painful. So the more that we heal those wounds, the more we can go into these situations anew and just say, you're just not worth my time. You're not, there's not, I have a friend, well, it was a previous friend that was a mentor, and she used to say, that's outside of my sphere of influence.
Mm.
And I love that saying, because it's really just saying, that's not on my radar. I can't influence this, so I'm not going to put my energy toward it. And sometimes what you're not putting your energy toward is sitting right across the table from you.
Yes. And when you don't put that energy forward, you re-fortify yourself.
You do.
A lot of people don't realize that in pouring their energy exhaustively into something that will not change, or somebody else's response, disrespect, you're letting that energy go. And so if you can hold on to it, you will be capable of so much more. You'll be able to endure so much more. And where we started in the beginning of this show, forgiveness is a pathway to that, but only in your time and only when you're ready to.
You have to decide what your response or your proactive reply is going to be. And sometimes it's going to be, no, I'm pulling my energy back in. I'm not giving energy to that. And sometimes your reply has to be, okay, it's happening right now, right here. And only you know that. The trick is you absolutely have to be accountable within yourself, even if nobody else at that table holds you accountable. You have to be accountable so that you walk away feeling proud of how you responded and feeling like you acted within your own integrity, whatever that entails. And nobody can make those decisions and those assessments except you.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself,
Yeah,
guys.
you could.
No, no, I couldn't have. This is Katrina's wisdom wheelhouse, because I do still, even as a healer, still have a little bit of petty in me. So um but guys, we are at that hour again. And there's so much covered in this. I watch it again, share it with your friends. The holidays are not just a happy go lucky time. I find myself, even though I have family to celebrate with, empathizing with those who don't, because they tend to get forgotten around this time of year. But here we have community, we have space and conversation that might be helpful to them. And, the whole time we were talking about just going to the house anyway, I was like, wouldn't it be funny? Walk up in there with like one of Katrina's candles just lit, and you're like carrying it in there like the heart. You put it on the mantle and you're like, this is my space now. But whatever you choose to do, that integrity piece is just you being you. Just like Katrina said, whatever that looks like, and hold on to that. And we had a comment from AJ saying it's just another day. That's perfect. Friendsgiving, whatever you want to decide, it is just another day, guys. And we're in this together. So, not next week, but the week after, we'll see you here on Crossroads of Cognizance again. Crossroads of Cognizance again. Have a great night, everybody. Bye.